Acts chapter 10. Now there was a certain man in Caesarea, a city in northwest Samaria, named Cornelius, a captain of a military company called the Italian Company. He was very devoted and continually having deep respect for Almighty, together with all his household, and made many merciful donations to the people, and petitioned Almighty regularly. About the 9th hour, 3 p.m. of the day, he plainly noticed in a vision a messenger from Almighty, coming in and saying to him, "Cornelius." Now after he had looked intently at him, and become frightened, he said, "What is it, Master?" Now he said to him, "Your prayers and your merciful donations have ascended as a memorial in front of Almighty. So now you must send some men to Joppa, a city on the coast of northwest Judea, and send for a certain Simon, who is called Peter. This person is lodging with another Simon, a tanner whose house is beside the sea." Now when the messenger who was speaking to him went away, he summoned 2 of his house slaves and a very devoted soldier from those who waited on him. And after he had described everything to them, he dispatched them to Joppa. Now on the next day, as they were journeying and drawing near the city, Peter went up on the housetop about the 6th hour, 12 noon, to pray. Now he became very hungry, and began wanting to taste some food. Yet while they were preparing it, he went into a trance. Then he was gazing at heaven opened up, and a certain item descending like a large sheet, being let down onto the earth by its 4 corners. In it were all kinds of 4-legged animals and reptiles of the earth, and the birds of the sky. Then a voice came to him, "Rise up, Peter. You must sacrifice, or kill them, and eat them." Yet Peter said, "Oh no, Master, for I have never eaten anything contaminated and unclean." Then again a voice came to him a second time, "What Almighty has cleaned, you must stop considering contaminated." Now this occurred 3 times. Then immediately the item was taken up into heaven. Now while Peter kept being bewildered in his mind as to what this vision that he had noticed may mean, notice, the men who had been dispatched by Cornelius, having asked the way to Simon's house, came and stood by the entryway. Then, shouting out, they began quizzing if Simon, who was called Peter, was lodging in this place. Now while Peter was engrossed in thinking about the vision, the Spirit said to him, "Notice, 3 men are seeking for you. But you must rise up and descend to them, and must go with them without any doubting, for I have dispatched them." Now when Peter had descended to the men, he said, "Notice, I am the person for whom you are asking. What has caused you to come here?" Now they said, "Cornelius, a captain, who is a just man, and a person who is continually having deep respect for Almighty, who in addition is testified to by the whole nation of the Jews, was given notice by a pure messenger to send for you to come to his house, and to hear declarations from you." So he then called or invited them in, and gave them lodging. Now when he rose up on the next day, he went away together with them, and some of the brothers from Joppa went with him. Now on the next day he entered into Caesarea, a city in northwest Samaria. Now Cornelius was expecting them, and had called together his relatives and close friends. Now when it occurred that Peter entered, Cornelius met him, and fell at his feet and worshipped him. Yet Peter raised him up, saying, "You must rise up. I too am just a human." Then as he conversed with him, he entered, where he found many had come together. In addition, he affirmed to them, "You have experience in the fact of how unlawful it is for a Jew to join with or come to another tribe. But Almighty has shown me not to say that any human is contaminated or unclean. For this reason, I came without even raising any objection when I was sent for. So then, this is my quiz to you. On what account have you sent for me?" Now Cornelius affirmed, "4 days ago to this hour, I was praying in my house during the 9th hour, 3 p.m., and notice, a man stood before me in dazzling attire, and he affirmed, 'Cornelius, your prayer has been heard, and your merciful donations have been remembered in Almighty's sight. So then, you must send word to Joppa, and call for Simon, who is called Peter. He is lodging in the house of Simon, a tanner beside the sea.' So then I sent word to you right away. In addition, you have done ideally in coming. Now then, we are all here present, in Almighty's sight, to hear everything that has been prescribed to you by the Master." Now Peter opened his mouth and said, "It is true, I am grasping that Almighty is showing no favoritism. Rather, in every nation, whoever is continually having deep respect for him, and continually doing works that are right and just, is acceptable to him. He has dispatched the word to the sons of Israel, spreading the good message about peace through Jesus, the Anointed One. This one is the Master of everyone. You are aware of that declaration that occurred throughout all Judea, beginning at Galilee, after the immersion that John proclaimed, how Almighty anointed Jesus of Nazareth with the pure spirit and power, and how he went to place after place, doing good work and healing everyone who was being tyrannized by the adversary, Satan, because Almighty was with him. Now we are witnesses of all the things that he did, both in the Jews' country and in Jerusalem. Now they also did away with him by hanging him on a stake. Almighty woke him up on the 3rd day, and granted that he should become disclosed, not to all the people, but to us, the witnesses who had been selected beforehand by Almighty, who ate and drank with him after he rose up from among the dead. Now he charged us to proclaim to the people, and to give testimony that this one is the one who has been designated by Almighty to be judge of the living and the dead. It is to this one that all the prophets are testifying, that whoever is continually believing in him is to obtain forgiveness of wrongs through his name, Jesus." While Peter was still speaking these declarations, the pure Spirit fell upon all those who were hearing the word. Now the believers who had come together with Peter came from circumcision, Judaism, and were amazed that the freely given gift of the pure Spirit had been poured out upon the pagans too. For they were hearing them speaking in foreign languages and magnifying Almighty. So Peter then responded, "No one can forbid using water to immerse these who have obtained the pure Spirit just like we did, can he?" Now he prescribed to them to be immersed in the name of Jesus, the Anointed One. Then they asked him to stay on for a few days. Acts chapter 11. Now the dispatched envoys and the brothers and sisters who were throughout Judea heard that the pagans had also accepted Almighty's word. Now when Peter went up to Jerusalem, those who had come from the circumcision, or Judaism, began raising their doubts with him, saying, "You went to uncircumcised men and ate with them?" Now Peter began and kept expounding it to them in sequence, saying, "I was in the city of Joppa praying, and in a trance I noticed a vision, a certain item descending like a large sheet being let down out of heaven by its four corners. And it came right down to me. When I looked intently into it, I began considering it, and noticed the four-legged animals of the earth, the wild beasts, the reptiles, and the birds of heaven. Now I also heard a voice saying to me, 'Rise up, Peter, you must sacrifice, or kill them and eat them.' Yet I said, 'Oh no, Master, for never has a contaminated or unclean thing entered into my mouth.' Yet a voice out of heaven responded a second time, 'What Almighty has cleaned, you must stop considering contaminated.' Now this occurred 3 times. Then everything was pulled up again into heaven. Now notice, right away 3 men came and stood by the house where we were, who had been dispatched from Caesarea, a city in northwest Samaria, to me. Now the Spirit said to me to go with them without any doubting. Now these 6 brothers also went with me, and we entered into the man's house. Now he reported to us how he had noticed the messenger standing in his house, and saying, 'You must dispatch word to Joppa, and send for Simon, who is called Peter. He will speak declarations to you, by which you will be saved from destruction, you and all your household.' Now as I began to speak, the pure Spirit fell upon them, just like it did upon us also in the beginning. Now I remembered the Master's declaration, how he used to say, 'John immersed in water, yet you will be immersed in the pure Spirit.' So then, if Almighty gave them an equal freely given gift, like he also did to us after we believed in the Master Jesus, the Anointed One, who was I to try and forbid Almighty?" Now when they heard these things, they were quiet, and esteemed Almighty, saying, "Therefore Almighty has granted even to the pagans the change in thoughts and feelings that leads to life in the last age." Yes, indeed, those who were dispersed from the oppression that occurred over Stephen went from place to place, as far as Phoenicia, West Lebanon, Cyprus, the large Mediterranean island, and Antioch, a city in northwest Syria, speaking the word to no one except to only Jews. Yet some of them were people from Cyprus and Cyrene, a city in Libya, North Africa, who went to Antioch, a city in northwest Syria, and began speaking to the non-Jews also, spreading the good message about the Master Jesus. And the hand of the Master was with them, and a large number believed and turned back to the Master. Now the account about them was heard in the ears of the group of called ones that was in Jerusalem, and they dispatched Barnabas out to Antioch, a city in northwest Syria. When he came along and noticed the favor that Almighty had granted them, he rejoiced and began encouraging them all to be continually staying with the Master with determined hearts. For he was a good man, and full of the pure spirit and faith. Now a considerable crowd was added to the Master. Now he went away to Tarsus, a city in Cilicia, South Turkey, to hunt for Saul, Paul. And when he had found him, he led him to Antioch, a city in northwest Syria. Now it occurred too that for a whole year they were gathered together with the group of called ones, and taught a considerable crowd. In addition, it was in Antioch, a city in northwest Syria, that the students were first dealt with the label Christians, followers of the Anointed One. Now during these days some prophets came down from Jerusalem north to Antioch, a city in northwest Syria. Now one of them, named Agabus, rose up and signified through the Spirit that a great famine was about to be on all the inhabited earth. This occurred under Claudius, Caesar from 41 to 54 A.D. Now just as any of the students was thriving, each one of them designated something to send for dispensing among the brothers and sisters, making a home in Judea. Now they did this, dispatching it to the older ones by the hands of Barnabas and Saul, or Paul. Acts chapter 12. Now during that time period, King Herod put his hands on some from the group of called ones to treat them badly. Now he did away with James, John's brother and Zebedee's son, with the sword. Now when he noticed that this was pleasing to the Jews, he proceeded to apprehend Peter too. This was during the days of the festival of unleavened biscuits. So after he had arrested him, he placed him in jail, delivering him over to 4 squads of 4 soldiers to guard him, intending after the Passover observance to lead him up to the people. Yes, indeed, Peter was kept in the jail, yet prayer kept being earnestly made by the group of called ones to Almighty about him. Now during the night, before Herod was going to lead him before them, Peter had fallen asleep between 2 soldiers, bound with 2 chains. In addition, guards were in front of the door keeping watch over the jail. Now notice, a messenger from the master came and stood by him, and a light shone in the room. Now he struck Peter on the side, and woke him up, saying, "Rise up quickly." And his chains fell from his hands. Now the messenger said to him, "Tighten your belt and put on your sandals." Now he did this. Then he said to him, "Put on your outer garment and follow me." Now he went out and kept following, but he didn't notice that this was truly occurring through the messenger. He kept having the impression that he was observing a vision. Now after they had passed the first and second guard posts, they came to the iron gate that leads into the city, which spontaneously opened for them. Now they went out and went forward 1 street. Then immediately the messenger withdrew from him. Then, when Peter came to his senses, he said, "Now I am truly aware that the Master has dispatched out his messenger, and yanked me out of Herod's hand, and out of everything that the Jewish people were expecting." In addition, being conscious, he went to the house of Mary, the mother of John, who was called Mark. In addition, being conscious, he went to the house of Mary, the mother of John, who was called Mark, where a considerable number were convened together and praying. Now when he knocked at the door of the entryway, a servant girl named Rhoda approached to answer. Now when she recognized Peter's voice, in her joy she didn't open the entryway, yet ran in and reported that Peter was standing in front of the entryway. Yet they said to her, "You are crazy." Yet she kept emphatically insisting that it was so. Yet they kept saying, "It is his messenger." Yet Peter kept persisting in his knocking. Now when they opened it, they noticed him and were amazed. Yet gesturing with his hand for them to become silent, he related to them how the master had led him out of the jail. In addition, he said, "You must report these things to James and to the brothers and sisters." Then he came out and went to a different place. Now when it became day, there was quite a bit of disturbance among the soldiers as to what had become of Peter. Now when Herod had sought for him and hadn't found him, he examined the guards and ordered that they be led away to death. Now he, Peter, went down from Judea northwest into Caesarea, a city in northwest Samaria, and was spending time there. Now he, Herod, was in a fighting rage with the residents of Tyre and Sidon. Yet with one mind they were coming to him, and having persuaded Blastus, the king's personal attendant, they were requesting peace, because their country was nourished from the king's country. Now on a set day, Herod, having put on his royal attire, sat on the platform and began delivering an address to them. Now the people shouted back, "The voice of a mighty one, and not of a human." Now instantly a messenger from the master struck him because he didn't give Almighty the esteem, and he was eaten by worms and stopped sensing anything. That is, he died. Now Almighty's word kept growing or spreading and multiplying. Now Barnabas and Saul, or Paul, returned from Jerusalem when they had fulfilled their dispensing service, taking along with them John, who was called Mark. Acts chapter 13. Now there were in Antioch, a city in northwest Syria, throughout the groups of called ones that was there, prophets and teachers: Barnabas Simeon, called Niger, black, and Lucius the Cyrenian from Cyrene in Libya, North Africa. In addition, Manaen, the foster brother of the quad prince Herod, and Saul, or Paul. Now while they were serving at attending to the master and fasting, the pure spirit said, "By all means you must cut off for me Barnabas and Saul, or Paul, for the work to which I have called them." Then, after they had fasted and prayed and placed their hands on them, they dismissed them. Yes, indeed, being sent out by the pure spirit, they went down to Seleucia, a Syrian coastal city, and from there sailed away to Cyprus, the large Mediterranean island. Then when they came to Salamis, a city on the east coast of Cyprus, they began announcing Almighty's word in the assemblies of the Jews. Now they also had John, Mark, as an assistant. Now when they had gone through the whole island as far as Paphos, a city on the west coast, they found a certain scientist, a Jewish false prophet, whose name was Bar Joshua, son of Joshua, who was with the provincial commissioner Sergius Paul, a man of understanding. He called for Barnabas and Saul, or Paul, and sought to hear Almighty's word. Now Elymas, the scientist, this is the meaning of his name after translation from Arabic, was standing up against them, seeking to pervert the provincial commissioner away from the faith. Now Saul, who was called Paul, filled with the pure spirit, looked intently at him, and said, "You who are full of every kind of fraud and villainous work, you son of the adversary, Satan, you enemy of every kind thing that is right and just, will you not stop perverting the straight ways of the Master? Now then, notice, the Master's hand is upon you, and you will be blind, and not observe the sun until the appointed time. Now instantly a fog and darkness fell upon him, and he went around seeking for someone to lead him by the hand. So when the provincial commissioner then noticed what had occurred, he believed, being astonished at the master's teaching. Now Paul and those around him set out from Paphos and came to Perga in Pamphylia, South Turkey. Yet John, Mark, departed from them and returned to Jerusalem. Now going on from Perga, they came along into the Antioch in Pisidia, south-central Turkey, and on the Sabbath day, Saturday, they entered into the Jewish assembly and sat down. Now after the reading of the law and the prophets, the assembly chiefs dispatched word to them, saying, Brothers, if you have any word of encouragement for the people, you must say it. Now Paul rose up, and gesturing with his hand, he said, People of Israel, and you who have deep respect for Almighty, you must hear this. The Almighty of this people, Israel, chose our forefathers and elevated the people when they were foreigners in the land of Egypt, and with his arm raised high, he led them out of it. Then, for about 40 years' time, he carried them around like a nursing mother in the wasteland. Then, after he had pulled down 7 nations in the land of Canaan, he distributed their land as an inheritance after about 450 years. Then, after these things, he gave them judges until the prophet Samuel. Then, from there, they requested a king. So Almighty gave them Saul, Kish's son, a man out of the tribe of Benjamin, for 40 years. Then, after he had deposed him, he raised up David for their king, about whom he also testified, saying, In David, Jesse's loon, I have found a man according to my heart, who will do everything that I want. 1 Samuel 13, verse 14. From this one seed, descendants, according to his promise, 2 Samuel 7, verse 12, Almighty has led to Israel a Savior, Jesus. Before his personal entrance, John had previously proclaimed immersion after a change in thoughts and feelings to all the people of Israel. Now, as John was finishing his course, he kept saying, What do you suspect that I am? I am not he. But notice, there is one coming after me, the sandal of his feet I'm not worthy to release. Brothers and sisters, descendants of Abraham, and those among you who have deep respect for Almighty, it was to us that the word of this salvation from destruction was dispatched. For those who make a home in Jerusalem and their chiefs were ignorant about him and about the prophets' voices that are read every Sabbath day, Saturday, and fulfilled them by judging him. Now, though they found no cause for his death, they requested Pilate to have him done away with. Now, when they had completely done everything that had been written about him, they took him down from the stake and placed him in a tomb. Yet Almighty woke him up from among the dead, and for many days he was seen by those who had ascended with him from Galilee to Jerusalem, who are now his witnesses to the people. Now we are spreading to you the good message of the promise that occurred to our forefathers, that this promise, Acts 13, verse 23, and 2 Samuel 7, verse 12, has been fully fulfilled by Almighty for us, their children, by raising up Jesus as it has also been written in the second of the musical compositions, or psalms. You are my son. Today I have caused you to be born. Musical composition 2, verse 7. Now that he has raised him up from among the dead, to no longer, by any means, be about to return to decay, he has declared like this: I will grant you the trustworthy and unadulterated things of David. Isaiah 55, verse 3. It is for this reason that he also says in a different place, You won't grant your unadulterated one to become acquainted with decay. Musical composition 16, verse 10. For the fact is that David, after he had assisted his own generation, by Almighty's counsel fell asleep or died, and was added to his forefathers, and became acquainted with decay. Yet the one whom Almighty woke up didn't become acquainted with decay. You must be continually knowing, brothers and sisters, that through this one forgiveness of wrongs is being announced to you, and that through union with this one, everyone who is continually believing is being justified in everything, from which you couldn't be justified by the law of Moses. So you must be continually looking out then, that what has been declared in the prophets might not come upon you. You must notice, you despisers, and must marvel, and must disappear, because I'm going to work a work during your days, a work that you shall by no means believe, even if someone describes the details to you. Habakkuk 1, verse 5. Now as they were going out, the people kept encouraging them to speak to them about these declarations on the next Sabbath day, or Saturday. Now when the assembly had broken up, many of the Jews and the devoted converts to Judaism followed Paul and Barnabas, who, as they spoke to them, kept persuading them to be continually staying in Almighty's favor. Now on the next Sabbath day, Saturday, almost the entire city was gathered to hear the Master's word. Yet when the Jews noticed the crowds, they were filled with jealousy, and began contradicting the things spoken by Paul, and were slandering him. Now Paul and Barnabas were bold, and said, It was necessary for Almighty's word to be spoken to you first. Yet since you are in fact pushing it away, and don't judge yourselves worthy of life in the last age, notice, we are turning to the pagans. For these are our directions from the Master. I have appointed you, Jesus, as a light to the pagans, for you to be the method of salvation from destruction as far as the limits of the earth. Isaiah 49, verse 6. Now when the pagans heard this, they began rejoicing and esteeming the Master's word, and as many as had been advocated for life in the last age believed. Now the Master's word was carried throughout the whole country, yet the Jews spurred on the most devoted and respected women and most prominent persons of the city, and stirred up a prosecution against Paul and Barnabas, and put them out from their boundaries. Yet they shook off the dust off their feet against them, and went to Iconium, a city in Lycaonia, southeast central Turkey. And the students continued to be filled with joy and the pure spirit. Acts chapter 14. Now in Iconium the same thing occurred. They entered into the assembly of the Jews, and spoke so that a great multitude of both Jews and non-Jews believed. Yet the unpersuaded Jews stirred up and provoked the sentient beings of the pagans against the brothers. Yes, indeed, they spent a considerable time there, continually speaking out boldly for the Master, who was continually testifying to the word about his favor, by granting signs and miracles to be continually occurring by means of their hands. Now the multitude of the city was split. Some were with the Jews, and some with the dispatched envoys. Now, when an impulse or attempt occurred among both the pagans and the Jews, together with their chiefs, to treat them with outrage and stone them, they were conscious of it and ran away for refuge to the Lycaonian or southeast central Turkey cities of Lystra and Derbe, and the surrounding country. And there they kept continually spreading the good message. Now in Lystra there was sitting a certain man who had no power in his feet, who was lame from his mother's belly, and who had never walked. He heard Paul speaking, who, when he had looked intently at him, and had noticed that he had faith that he would be saved from his weakness, said to him with a loud voice, "Rise up, erect on your feet." Then he leaped up and began walking. In addition, when the crowds noticed what Paul had done, they lifted up their voice in the Lycaonian language, saying, "The mighty ones have become like humans and descended to us." In addition, they called Barnabas Jupiter, the chief pagan mighty one, and Paul Mercury, the pagan messenger mighty one, and the mighty one of eloquence, since he was in fact the leading speaker. In addition, the priest of the temple of Jupiter that was at the front of the city brought bulls and wreaths to the entryways, and was wanting to offer sacrifice together with the crowds. Now when the dispatched envoys, Barnabas and Paul, heard this, they tore their garments and dashed out into the crowd, yelling out and saying, "People, why are you doing these things? We are also humans with emotions like yours, and we are spreading the good message to you to turn your back from these meaningless things to a living Almighty, who made the heaven, the earth, the sea, and everything that is in them. In bygone generations, he let all the pagans go their own ways, although he didn't leave himself without a testimony of good works, giving you showers from the sky and fruit-producing seasons, filling you with nourishment and gladness to your heart's content." Even by saying these things, they barely stopped the crowds from offering a sacrifice to them. Yet Jews came from Antioch and Iconium, and after they had persuaded the crowds, they stoned Paul and dragged him outside of the city, surmising that he was dead. Yet when the students surrounded him, he rose up and entered the city. Then on the next day he went out with Barnabas to Derbe. In addition, after spreading the good message in that city, and making a considerable number of students, they returned to Lystra, Iconium, and Antioch, solidly establishing the sentient beings of the students, encouraging them to be continually staying in the faith, and saying, "We have to enter into Almighty's kingdom by going through many oppressions." Now, in group after group of called ones, after they had selected some older ones in them and prayed with fastings, they committed them to the Master, in whom they had believed. Then they passed through Pisidia, south-central Turkey, and came to Pamphylia, South Turkey. Then, after they had spoken the Master's word in Perga, they descended to Attalia, a coastal city of Pamphylia, South Turkey, and from there they sailed away to Antioch, a city in northwest Syria, where they had been delivered over to Almighty's favor for the work that they had fulfilled. Now when they had come along and gathered the group of called ones, they began delivering the message among them about everything that Almighty had done with them, and how he had opened a door of faith to the pagans. Now they spent a long time with the students. Acts chapter 15. Now some people came down from Judea and began teaching the brothers and sisters, "Unless you men are circumcised according to the custom of Moses, you can't be saved from destruction." Now when there occurred quite a bit of commotion and questioning between them and Paul and Barnabas, it was advocated that Paul and Barnabas and some others from among them should go up to Jerusalem to the dispatched envoys and older ones about this question. Yes, indeed, they were helped on their way by the group of called ones, and as they were passing through both Phoenicia, West Lebanon, and Samaria, they were continually describing in detail about the turning around of the pagans, and were causing great joy to all the brothers and sisters. Now when they came along into Jerusalem, they were welcomed by the group of called ones, the dispatched envoys, and the older ones. In addition, they delivered the message among them about everything that Almighty had done with them. Yet some people from the sect or denomination of the Pharisees, note, Pharisees were members of the conservative Jewish sect, who had now become believers, rose up and said, "They have to be circumcised and charged to keep the law of Moses." Now the dispatched envoys and the older ones were gathered to see about this matter. Now after much questioning had occurred, Peter rose up and said to them, "Brothers and sisters, you have expertise in the fact that from the beginning days Almighty chose among you, that through my mouth the pagans should hear the word of the good message and believe. Now Almighty, who knows what is in hearts, testified to them, giving them the pure spirit, just as he also did to us, and discriminated in nothing between us and them, making their hearts clean by faith. So then, why are you now testing Almighty by placing a yoke upon the necks of the students that neither our forefathers nor we have been strong enough to carry? Rather, we are continually believing that we are saved from destruction through the favor of the Master Jesus, in the same manner as they also are." Now the entire multitude became silent, and they were hearing Barnabas and Saul, as they were describing what signs and miracles Almighty had done through them among the pagans. Now after they had become silent, James responded, saying, "Brothers and sisters, hear me. Simon Peter has described how for the first time Almighty has taken care of the pagans, and obtained from among them a people for his name, Jesus. Now the words of the prophets agree with this, just as it has been written, 'After these things I will return, and I will rebuild the tent of David that has fallen, and I will rebuild its overturned structure, and I will re-erect it, so that the rest of humanity might seek out the Master, even all the pagans, over whom my name, Jesus, has been called, says the Master, who is doing these things." Amos 9, verses 11 through 12. This has been known from earlier in this age. For this reason, it is my decision that I'm not going to harass those from the pagans who are turning back to Almighty, but that we should write a letter to them to be continually abstaining from eating things that have been polluted, in ceremonies to idols, from non-marital sexual intercourse, from eating strangled animals, and from eating blood. For Moses, from ancient generations, has had those who proclaim him in city after city, since he is read in the Jewish assemblies every Sabbath day, Saturday. So then, it seemed good to the dispatched envoys and the older ones, together with the whole group of called ones, to send some chosen men from among them to Antioch, a city in northwest Syria, with Paul and Barnabas, Judas, called Barsabas, and Silas, leading men among the brothers and sisters, and to send this that they had written by them. This is from the dispatched envoys and the older brothers, to the brothers and sisters who have come from the pagans to Antioch, a city in northwest Syria, and Cilicia, southeast Turkey. Rejoice, since we have in fact heard that some who went out from us, whom we gave no assignment, have disturbed you with their words, unsettling your sentient beings. It seemed good to us, since we have become of one mind, to send some chosen men to you with our dearly loved ones Barnabas and Paul, humans who have delivered over their sentient beings on behalf of the name of our Master Jesus, the Anointed One. So then, we have dispatched Judas, Barsabas, and Silas, and they're going to report the same things by their account. For it seemed good to the pure spirit and to us not to place one more burden upon you than these necessities. Be continually abstaining from eating idol sacrifices, from eating blood, from eating strangled animals, and from non-marital sexual intercourse. If you continually keep yourselves carefully away from these things, you will be practicing well. Goodbye. Yes, indeed, when they were dismissed, they went down north to Antioch, a city in northwest Syria. And after they had gathered the multitude, they handed them the letter. Now when they had read it, they rejoiced at the encouragement. In addition, Judas and Silas, who were also themselves prophets, encouraged and solidly established the brothers and sisters with a lengthy account. Now after they had been there for some time, they were dismissed with peace from the brothers and sisters to those who had dispatched them. No verse 34. Yet Paul and Barnabas were spending more time in Antioch, teaching and spreading the good message of the Master's word, along with many other people also. Now after some days, Paul said to Barnabas, "By all means, we should return and take care of the brothers and sisters in every city in which we announce the Master's word, and see how they are." Now Barnabas was intending to also take along John, who was called Mark, with them. Yet Paul kept considering that he wasn't worthy to be taken along, since he had withdrawn from them in Pamphylia, South Turkey, and hadn't gone on with them in the work. Acts 13, verse 13. Now they became so incensed that they recoiled from one another. In addition, Barnabas took Mark along and sailed off to Cyprus, the large Mediterranean island. Now Paul chose Silas and went away, after he had been delivered over to the Master's favor by the brothers and sisters. Now he was passing through Syria and Cilicia, southeast Turkey, solidly establishing the groups of called ones. Acts chapter 16. Now he also eventually reached Derbe and Lystra in Lycaonia, southeast central Turkey. Now notice, a certain student was there named Timothy, who was the son of a Jewish woman who was a believer, yet his father was a non-Jew. He was testified about by the brothers and sisters in Lystra and Iconium, also Lycaonia. Paul wanted him to go away with him, and he took him and circumcised him, because of the Jews who were in those places, for they all were aware that his father belonged to the non-Jews. Now as they were going through the cities, they were delivering over the decrees that had been decided upon by the dispatched envoys and older ones who were in Jerusalem, for them to maintain. Yes, indeed, the groups of called ones kept being solidly established with respect to the faith, and kept growing abundantly in number day after day. Now they passed through the Phrygian and Galatian province, central Turkey, having been forbidden by the pure spirit to speak the word in the province of Asia, Mysia, Lydia, Caria, and Asian Phrygia, West Turkey. Yet when they came to Mysia, northwest Turkey, they attempted to go northeast into Bithynia, North Turkey, but Jesus' Spirit didn't let them. Yet they passed over to Mysia, northwest Turkey, and descended into Troas, a free city on the coast of Mysia, northwest Turkey. Then during the night a vision was seen by Paul. A certain man of Macedonia, North Greece, was standing and encouraging him, and saying, "You must cross over into Macedonia, North Greece, and help us." Now when he had noticed the vision, he immediately sought to go away to Macedonia, North Greece, figuring out that Almighty had called us to spread the good message to them. Now setting out to sea from Troas, we ran a straight course to Samothracia, an island, yet on the following day to Neapolis, a coastal city of Macedonia, North Greece. Then, from there, 10 miles by land to Philippi, which is a Roman colony, and most prominent city in the part of Macedonia, North Greece. Now, we were spending time in this city for some days. In addition, on the Sabbath day, Saturday, we went outside of the gate of the city and along a river, where we were surmising that there was going to be a place of prayer. And we sat down and began speaking to the women who had come together. Now a certain woman named Lydia, a seller of colored cloth from the city of Thyatira, a city in Lydia, West Turkey, who was devoted to Almighty, kept hearing us, and the Master opened up her heart to pay attention to the things being spoken by Paul. Now when she and her household had been immersed, she encouraged us, saying, "If you have judged me to be faithful to the Master, you must enter and be staying at my house." Now she urged us to do so. Now, on another day, it occurred that while we were going to the place of prayer, a certain servant girl with a python spirit of prophetic ventriloquism met us, who kept making a great income to her masters by fortune-telling. Following behind Paul and us, she kept yelling out, saying, "These humans are slaves of the Most High God, who are announcing to you the way to salvation from destruction." Now she kept doing this for many days, yet Paul became so exasperated that he turned around and said to the spirit, "I charge you in the name of Jesus, the Anointed One, to come out of her." And at that very hour it went out. Now when her masters noticed that the hope of their income had gone away, they took hold of Paul and Silas and dragged them into the marketplace before the chiefs. Then when they had led them to the officers, they said, "These humans, who belong to the Jews, are continually disturbing our city, and are continually announcing customs that aren't allowed for us Romans to accept or do." Now the crowd came and stood together against them. So when the officers had tore off their garments, they were ordering them to be beaten with rods, an illegal treatment for a Roman citizen like Paul. In addition, after they had placed many blows upon them, they threw them into jail, charging the warden to keep them securely. So when he got such a charge, he threw them into the interior jail and secured their feet in the stocks. Now at midnight, 9 p.m. to 12 a.m., Paul and Silas were praying and singing songs of praise to Almighty, and the prisoners were listening to them. Now suddenly a great quake occurred, so that the foundations of the prison were shaken, and instantly all the doors were opened, and everyone's prison restraints were unfastened. Now when the warden came out of his sleep and noticed that the jail doors were open, he pulled out his sword and was about to do away with himself, surmising that the prisoners had escaped. Yet Paul shouted out with a loud voice, saying, "You must not behave in a bad way to yourself, for we are all here." Now he requested some lights and dashed in, and started to tremble. He fell down before Paul and Silas. Then, preceding them out, he affirmed, "Masters, what do I have to do that I might be saved from destruction?" Now they said, "Believe on the Master Jesus, and you and your household will be saved from destruction." Then they spoke the Master's word to him together with all those who were in his household. Then, after he took them aside in that hour of the night, and bathed off their blows in a pool or river, he and all his household were immersed instantly. In addition, he led them up again into his house, and he placed a table of food before them, and together with all his household, he celebrated that he had begun believing in Almighty. Now when it became day, the officers dispatched their policemen, saying, "Release those humans." Now the warden reported these words to Paul, saying, "The officers have dispatched orders for you to be released. So then, you must come out now and go in peace." Yet Paul affirmed to them, "They have lashed us in public, uncondemned, even though we are humans who are Romans. Then they threw us into jail, and now they're going to put us out in a manner escaping notice? No! Rather, they must come themselves and lead us out." Now the policemen reported these declarations to the officers. Now they were afraid when they heard that they were Romans. So they came and encouraged them, and when they had led them out, they kept asking them to go away from the city. Now when they went out of the jail, they went to Lydia's house. And when they had seen the brothers and sisters, they encouraged them, and then went away. Acts chapter 17. Now when they made their way through Amphipolis and Apollonia, both in Macedonia, North Greece, they came to Thessalonica, also in Macedonia, where there was an assembly of the Jews. Now as was Paul's custom, he entered among them, and on 3 Sabbath days, Saturdays, he talked to them from the writings, opening up and placing before them that the Anointed One had to suffer and rise up from among the dead, and saying, "This Jesus, whom I am announcing to you, is the Anointed One." Now some of them were persuaded, and threw in their lot with Paul and Silas. Both a great multitude of the devoted non-Jews, along with a considerable number of the most prominent women. Now the Jews were jealous, and took along some wicked men from the loafers in the marketplace. Then, when they had made up a mob, they began making a turmoil in the city. Then, when they came upon Jason's house, where Paul and Silas had been staying, they were seeking to lead them out before the people. Now when they didn't find them, they began dragging Jason and some of the brothers and sisters to the city chiefs, crying out, "These people have raised the inhabited earth to insurrection, are present here too, and Jason has provided them accommodations. Now all of these have behaviors contrary to the decrees of Caesar, saying that there is a different king, Jesus." Now they disturbed the crowd and the city chiefs who heard these things. So after they had obtained some surety, or money or property that could be forfeited if it happened again, from Jason and the rest, they released them. Now the brothers and sisters immediately sent both Paul and Silas out by night to Berea, in Macedonia, North Greece. When they came along, they went into the assembly of the Jews. Now these were more high class than those in Thessalonica, for they accepted the word most eagerly, examining the writings day after day, to see if these things were so. Yes, indeed, many of them believed, along with a considerable number of the respected non-Jewish women and men. Now after the Jews from Thessalonica knew that Almighty's word had been announced by Paul in Berea also, they came there too, agitating and disturbing the crowds. So now immediately the brothers and sisters then sent away Paul to go as far as the sea. In addition, both Silas and Timothy stayed behind there. Now those who were escorting Paul led him by ship as far as Athens, a city in Achaia, South Greece. Then when they had obtained a direction for Silas and Timothy to go to him as soon as possible, they were off. Now while Paul was waiting for them in Athens, his spirit was being incited inside him as he gazed at the idols that filled the city. Yes, indeed, he kept talking in the assembly to the Jews and the devoted Greeks, and in the marketplace day after day with those who happened along. Now some of the Epicurean philosophers, materialistic atheists, and Stoic philosophers, pantheists, those who believe that the universe is almighty, were huddling together with him. Then some were saying, "What does this garbage scavenger want to say?" Yet others, "He seems to be an announcer of strange demons," because he was spreading the good message to them about Jesus and the resurrection. In addition, they took hold of him and led him to the Mars Hill Auditorium, saying, "May we know about this new teaching that you are continually speaking? For you are bringing some things that are strange to our hearing. So then, we are resolving to know what these things mean." Now, all the Athenians and the visiting strangers kept taking opportunities for nothing other than to be saying or hearing something new. Now Paul stood in the center of the Mars Hill Auditorium and affirmed, "People of Athens, I have gazed at every turn how very religious you are. For as I was passing through and contemplating the objects of your devotion, I also found an altar with this inscription, 'To an unknown mighty one.' So then, the one to whom you are devoted in ignorance, this one I am announcing to you. The Almighty who made the world and everything that is in it, since he is inherently the master of heaven and earth, doesn't make a home in temples made by hands. Neither is he attended to by human hands, as though he required anything, since he himself gives to all life, breath, and everything. In addition, he made from one person, Adam, every nation of humanity to make a home on all the surface of the earth, having designated the setting of their time periods, and the boundaries inside which they would make a home, so that they might be seeking Almighty, if only they would definitely feel their way to Him and find Him, although definitely He isn't far from any one of us. For through union with Him, we are living and moving and existing, as even some of your own descendants of Him, Jupiter. So then, since we are descendants of Almighty, we ought not surmise that the divine nature is like gold, silver, or stone, a sculpture of human art and feeling. Yes, indeed, while Almighty has overlooked the times of ignorance, He is now charging humanity that everyone, everywhere, is to change his thoughts and feelings, because He has established a day, the day of the last age, in which He is going to judge the inhabited earth in a manner that is right and just, through the man Jesus, whom He has designated, and He has presented a reason for everyone to have faith by raising Him up from among the dead. Now when they heard about a resurrection from the dead, the fact is that some began jeering, yet others said, "We will hear again concerning this." So Paul went out from among them, yet some people joined him and believed, among whom also was Dionysius, one of the judges of the Mars Hill court, and a woman named Damaris, and others with them. Acts chapter 18. After these things he departed from Athens, a city in Achaia, South Greece, and went to Corinth, also in Achaia. Then he found a certain Jew named Aquila, a native of Pontus, northeast Turkey, who had recently come from Italy with his wife Priscilla, because Claudius Caesar had advocated that all the Jews depart from Rome. He went to see them, and because they were tent makers by craft, and he was of the same craft, he stayed with them and was working with them. Now every Sabbath day, Saturday, he was talking in the Jewish assembly and trying to persuade both Jews and non-Jews. Now when Silas and Timothy came down from Macedonia, North Greece, Paul began pressing himself in the word, giving testimony to the Jews that Jesus is the Anointed One. Now as they were continually resisting and slandering him, he shook out his garments and said to them, "Your blood is upon your heads. I am clean. From now on I will go to the pagans." So he proceeded from there and entered the house of a certain person named Titus Justus, who was devoted to Almighty, whose house was adjacent to the Jewish assembly. Now Crispus, an assembly chief, believed the master, together with his whole household, and many of the Corinthians, when they heard the word, were believing and being immersed. Now the master said to Paul in the night by means of a vision, "You must never be afraid, but must be continually speaking and not be silent. For I am continually with you, and no one will place their hands on you in order to treat you badly, because there are many of my people in this city." Now he was situated there for 1 year and 6 months, teaching Almighty's word among them. Now while Gallio was the provincial commissioner of Achaia, South Greece, The Jews with one mind assaulted Paul and led him to the platform, saying, "This person is continually inducing humans to be devoted to Almighty contrary to the law." Now when Paul was about to open his mouth, Gallio said to the Jews, "If it were because of some injury or wicked, villainous work, I would, on that account, tolerate you Jews. Yet since it is a question about words and names and your own law, you must see to it. I don't intend to be a judge of these things." So he drove them away from the platform. Yet they all, the Greeks, took hold of Sosthenes, a chief of the Jewish assembly, and began beating him in front of the platform. But Gallio didn't care about any of these things. Now after Paul had stayed with the brothers and sisters for a considerable number of days longer, he said goodbye to them and sailed off for Syria, together with Priscilla and her husband Aquila. He, Paul, had cut off the hair of his head in Cenchrea, a coastal city in Achaia, South Greece, for he was keeping a vow. Now they eventually reached Ephesus, a coastal city in Lydia, West Turkey, and he left them there. Now he himself entered the Jewish assembly and talked to the Jews. Yet when they asked him to stay for a longer time, he didn't consent. But saying goodbye, he said, "I will come back to you again, if it is what Almighty wants." Then he set out by ship from Ephesus, a coastal city in Lydia, West Turkey. Then when he came down into Caesarea, a city in northwest Samaria, he went up to Jerusalem and greeted the group of called ones, and then he descended north to Antioch, a city in northwest Syria. Then, after spending some time there, he went away, going from place to place in sequence through the Galatian and Phrygian province, central Turkey, solidly establishing all the students. Now a certain Jew named Apollos, a native Alexandrian from Alexandria, Egypt, a scholarly man, eventually reached Ephesus, a coastal city in Lydia, West Turkey, and he was very able in the writings. He had been instructed in the way of the Master, and boiling with enthusiasm spiritually, he was speaking and teaching accurately the things about Jesus, but he had expertise only in John's immersion. In addition, he began to speak out boldly in the Jewish assembly. Yet when Priscilla and her husband Aquila heard him, they took him aside, and then they expounded to him more accurately on the way of Almighty. Now, when he was intending to pass through into Achaia, South Greece, the brothers and sisters promoted the idea and wrote to the students to welcome him. And when he had come along, he huddled together often with those who had believed through favor. For he kept vigorously and thoroughly refuting the Jews in public, showing through the writings that Jesus is the Anointed One.